Hi students, welcome back. In this video, we'll walk through Lab 2 Excel 1 together, and this is also a preparation video for Quiz 1, which will take place at the beginning of Lab 2. So first off, navigate to Files, and you'll see that the lab files are organized in here underneath all the files, and then the lab videos, which this one will be uploaded here as well, together with the first video that I did, the introduction to syllabus, and as well as lab 1. So after you download the file, which should be this one, read through the file and feel free to pause the video at any time to read again, or to look up any terms that you're not familiar with on the internet. After you read the first few questions and the prompt of this lab, let's look at this lab together. So here I'm showing you a solution of this lab to give you a better grip of what's expected at the end of the lab. So as you can see, this file is named lab2 underscore excel1 underscore solution. As for your Excel file that you will be submitting, it should be named lab2 underscore excel1 underscore your last name. At the beginning of sheet 1, you should have your name displayed just like this, as well as your email underneath. Sheet 1 will contain your answers for question 1. So question 1 basically gives you 4 radius and asks you to calculate their respective circumferences and areas. So you construct a table just like this, and you put pi equal to on one cell, 3.14, that's the value of pi on the other cell. You can put 3.14159 as I did, or you can just do 3.14. So as for the table, make sure that it doesn't have to all be right adjusted. You can do all left adjusted, but leaving it inconsistent is undesired. So please make sure that you pick a side and stick with that. So as far as I'm concerned, I would prefer right adjusted for this table, so I did this. Make sure that you border all cells from here. You can choose this area and border all borders, and you can select the first labeling row and select bold. You can bold the text. And then you enter the radius right here, which was given on the textbook. And then for the circumference, these are the cells that you need to calculate. So click on the cell that stands for the circumference for the first radius, type in equal to, you click on pi because the formula is 2 pi radius. So type 2 times pi times radius. You can just click on this radius right here, and it generates you a number. That is the circumference when radius is 1. But we're going to do some slight modification here. Notice that C4 is the value of pi. But as we're going to keep referencing this number, we want this number to stay on here. Otherwise, I'll show you. This is called the fill handlebar. As the cross becomes a solid and small cross, you drag it all across so that the formula you had just typed in can be transferred into the following cells. And the reason why these numbers do not make sense currently is because as you're scrolling down, as you can see, it's tracking the cell C4. It used to be C4 from this cell. It becomes C5, C6, and C7. And then, as you can see, B9 is supposed to be this radius. As it travels down, it becomes B10 and B11. It makes sense for for the radius to keep traveling down as the radius changes, but pi is a constant number and it should not change. So how do we keep it constant? We add a couple signs in front of the letter and the number, and that's a cash sign on your keyboard, and this makes pi stay in its place as C4. So we'll try that again. Use the fill handlebar, you fill it, and now it's the correct number. As you travel down, C4 does not change because of the two cash signs you have just inserted. So similarly, we're going to do the area. So the area's formula is pi radius to the second power. So you enter that as how we did it for the circumference. Use the fill handle and track it down. And now you're completed with your first question. Moving on to the second. The gist of the second question is to solve a quadratic equation. Coefficient A, B, and C are given, and you're required to calculate for root 1 and root 2 for these 5 different quadratic equations. So here the formula for the roots are given, so all you need to do is to create a table just like this. You can choose to left adjust or right adjust the table as you wish, as long as it's uniform and looks clean and professional. And make sure you bold the first row, which is the labeling row, and input the number as is shown on your textbook. And now we're ready to calculate for root 1. How you do it is you enter the formula as indicated below. Make sure that you change the cells to your own cell. So C3 in here does not really make sense. And if you see here, I have C4 referencing coefficient A on this row, and then B4 and D4 accordingly. As I'm traveling down to the second row, it changes to C5, C5, B5, and D5, so on and so forth. And of course, you only need to enter the formula once, and that is the convenience of using a fill handle. As you drag down, it automatically calculates all of these cells for you, grabbing different coefficients from different rows. Similarly, you do the same for root 2, just a very slight difference right here, changing the plus to minus for root 2, and you drag down, you get the roots for different combinations of coefficients. You're almost done, except for in this question, we're also going to learn about conditional formatting. So some of the roots are below 0, some of the roots are positive and above 0, and we want to differentiate that just with one look. How do we do that? We can color them by hand. Of course, I can color and highlight different numbers, and I can uncolor them and turn them back to original. But if I had used conditional formatting, which is right here, I won't be able to turn the color to black. Even though I'm clicking on it, it won't turn black. And I want you to learn this because this saves the trouble of you individually coloring each and every one of them. You set the rule and it will color for you automatically. So this is how you do it. You select the desired area, which is this table we have just created. Click on conditional formatting. Use the first option, highlight cell rules. Right here, we want to highlight the cells that are less than 0. So click on less than and type in 0. Make sure that it already says cell value less than 0. And format with, we don't really want to fill the cell with this pink color, so we go ahead and choose a different option. We can choose red text, and here's a preview of how your cell is going to look if it satisfies this condition. So go ahead and say OK. And now that all your cells are highlighted in red by itself, It's not because you went ahead and colored them individually, if that makes sense. So a couple of formatting details are highlighted below. We want all the cells to be 2 decimal places. How you can adjust that is you can select the desired area and use increase or decrease decimal places as you wish. Second one is bordering, and make sure that you have it all bordered. And here are different options that you can do: a heavier border, thick border around certain cells as you wish, like that. Make sure that there is enough space to display all the numbers in a cell. If it's too cramped, like this one, it won't show very nicely. So just hover over this border line and double click. It will auto adjust to a desirable width. We already talked about conditional formatting, and that's it for question 2. Moving on to question 3. Construct a table just like this one. You can left or right adjust it or middle adjust it. And then the first 2 columns are given in the book. So type them up as shown in the book. All you need to do is to calculate the ranges for different initial velocities and firing angles. So here is a formula for that. All you need to do is double click on the cell. You can either type in the formula on the formula bar or directly in the cell. All formula must start with equal to sign. If you don't have the equal sign, it will not calculate for you. So say equal to, and then you can just do this formula. But just make sure that you refer to the correct cells. A2 is this cell right here, and B2 is this cell right here. As you move down, you can see that it becomes A3 and B3. No, just undid it. Okay, so as you can see, this one is A4, and as you move down, it becomes A5. You only need to type in the formula once by doing it in the first cell. After you're done, just use the fill handle and fill it up. And that will be it for question 3. Moving on to question 4, we're going to learn the difference between rounding and formatting to a certain decimal point. So I'll give you an example of this number pi. So imagine we're rounding it to the thousandths. You actually use a formula to do that. In order to do that, in the formula ribbon or in the cell itself, you can type in equal to round, parentheses, this number that you're rounding, and then this is the decimal points that you want to leave it to. So you want to have 3 decimal points. So you can do 3. If I want to do 2, I can type in 2, and it will become this. As you can see, it's not exactly the same with formatting it to this decimal point, because as I expanded, it will be a different number as this. Rounding means that you're cutting off whatever is behind your designated number of decimal points, and you're changing it, rounding it to a different number. So this number we have just rounded, we truncated whatever is after 4 and made it into a different number, although it is rounded and very close to the original number. But if you format a number, it won't change the value of the number itself, although the display will change, and it could appear that they look exactly the same, but they're not. Okay, they're actually not different. They're actually not the same, sorry. So with that knowledge and also the knowledge of the formula, how to calculate tangents for a certain radian. So you can use tan, T-A-N, parentheses radians. We can solve this question right here. So the first column is given and required. So the degrees, you can do the first two, 0 and 10. You can take advantage of the fill handle and just fill it up to wherever you want to stop. So in this question, we're going to stop at 360 degrees. And then you calculate the radians for each and every degree listed on the left by using the radians formula. And on top of that, on the outside, we're going to round it to the third decimal points. Remember in the first few questions, we actually used formatting to the closest hundreds, but in this one instead, we're going to do rounding to the thousands. After you're done with that, we're going to do the tangent of the radians. That's just tan, clicking on the radians cell. After that, what you can do is you can select both of the cells for a radian and a tangent, use a fill handle, and you can just fill it up. The only thing I want to explain is that it looks very strange when the degrees hit the multiples of 90, so 90, 180, 270, as well as 360. They look unusually large or out of pattern because tangent of 90 and its multiples does not exist. So this number does not mean anything, but you can just leave it on there. So now we're done with question 4. Moving on to question 5. Question 5 is really just a continuation of question 2. So what I want you to do is go back to sheet number 2 and select copy of this this table. Right now on my keyboard I'm doing Control-C and then going back to sheet 5. I will pretend that I'm doing it again. So I'm going to do Control-V to make sure that everything you had just copied is exactly as shown on sheet 2. You select. You keep source formatting to make sure that it's exactly the same format as you had copied and pasted from sheet 2. So after you've done that, you should have an identical table from sheet 2 to sheet 5. I'm going to delete this one just to make my table look a little cleaner. And then now we have this one right here. What we want to do right here is that from sheet 2, you can notice when a condition is violated, that condition is 2 times the coefficient of A is unequal to 0. But it is violated right here when 2A is equal to 0. And if that is the case, the condition is violated and the roots cannot be calculated. However, though, if you notice, these messages don't really make sense right here. In order to make sense and make it more intuitive for the readers to understand, we're going to do a little bit of tweaking and coding right here using the if condition. So what we're going to do differently is that we're still going to take the exact same equations to calculate root 1 and root 2. It's just we're going to put an if condition around it. So putting an if condition around it, and you state your condition, which is 2 times coefficient A equals to 0. If that is true, simply display this text, divide by 0. And in the coding, you need to have quotes around this text. However, though, when it displays, as you can see, the quotes gets taken off. But you have to have that in the if condition. So if this condition is violated, meaning that 2 times coefficient A is not equal to 0, go ahead and calculate the roots as is shown right here. So let's try it out. So if we have typed it in the first row for root 1 and root 2, we'll just drag it and fill it all. It will automatically show, if you had coded it correctly, divide by 0 right here. And now we have gone through all 5 questions and the gist of them. I hope this is helping you to prep for our quiz 1, which the questions will be created with the by the content of the items that I discussed today. So good luck, and I'll see you next class.